This right here is the reason that I love thrifting. It's the Pioneer PL-514 turntable, and it came with a little bonus. So today we're going to calibrate it. Then I'm going to show you what I did to sort of polish up the dust cover because it was really scuffed up. Stick around. All right, first things first, this is a secondhand turntable, which means before we do anything, we need to calibrate it before we try to play a record. More often than not, if you find a turntable at a thrift store, you'll need to reset the tracking force, the anti-skate, and probably every other thing you can calibrate. Why? Well, because people tend to fiddle with things in stores, and who knows what or who has screwed with it between its last play and when you bought it. So that's what we're going to look at first. Now, I already know that it turns on and runs because I was able to test that in the store. As obvious as it seems, that's really the first thing to look at. Does it even turn on, or are you buying a big vintage paperweight? It's a belt-driven machine, and as you can see, there's a functional belt in there, though I suspect it's been changed because it's suspiciously narrow for this model. Everything else appears to be intact except for the tone arm rest, which does admittedly have a little bit of damage on it. I've been checking eBay every day to find an original replacement for that, but nothing's come up as of writing the script, unfortunately. I will change it as soon as I find one. But the badges are all present and undamaged, the speed selector isn't chipped or broken, the labeling is good, and the rubber mat is not deteriorating. Most importantly, the stylus is in decent shape. So let's calibrate the tracking force. If you saw my video on the Technics SLD2 recently, you'll recall that the tracking force is determined by the cartridge, not the turntable itself. The cartridge is this little part that has the stylus or needle and the little magnets and coils which reproduce the sound. And most importantly for us, they're modular, which means you can swap them out, upgrade them, or change them to your personal taste. They're only held on with 2 little flathead bolts and 4 very delicate wires. So the very first step in setting your tracking force is to figure out what cartridge you have. Is it the stock one or has it been changed? The user manual implies that it would have come with a Pioneer PC-135 cartridge. The service manual, on the other hand, specifies a PC-110/2, and it actually specifies the tracking force, which would be really helpful, except this is neither of those. Fortunately, it's a little better than that. Whoever had this thing previously upgraded the stylus to this Empire 3000 Mark III, which is not to be confused with the Austin Healey 3000 Mark III, even though they're about the same size. So now all we need to do is look up the specs and the tracking force for this cartridge, which according to several websites is between 1 and 1.5 grams. Now given that range, I'm going to go to 1.5 grams just because I found I seem to get less skipping with a little bit more tracking force. So we'll unclip the tone arm and raise it up with the Q lever. Then we want to turn the counterweight in or out until it balances evenly without lifting up or resting on the cueing platform. Once it's there, I'll bring it back to the rest position and clip it in place so that it doesn't flop around. With the tone arm secured, all you do is zero out the dial by turning the indicator without turning the weight. Then you just twist the weight and indicator inward until it reads 1.5 grams. Now you can assume that that's correct and move on, but I do happen to have a little digital scale here so we can double check to see if it's right. Because of the height, I do have to remove the rubber mat. I'll center the stylus over the circle, drop the tone arm, and it's correct. The general rule of thumb is that the anti-skate should match the tracking force, so I'll set that to 1.5 as well. That should be sufficient, and most of the time that's all you need to do. Keep in mind, these are old pieces of equipment, and the springs can wear out after 40 or 50 years, so if it still jumps around, don't be afraid to fiddle with it a little bit to get your tone arm to stay put. The point is to make it not do this while it's playing. Now, there's one more thing that we need to check before we try to play a record, and that's the auto return trigger position. Again, ideally that's something that should have either been set at the factory or by the original owner, but since we're dealing with a thrift store item that's been moved around and jostled and messed with, we'll want to make sure that that's correct as well. Keep in mind, these are all things that anybody can do. If you've never done this kind of thing before, just follow along and I am sure that you can figure it out. If I can do it, you can do it. The easiest way to test this is just to try it. I usually drop the tone arm close to the middle and see when it lifts up to bring it back to the rest. It should do it somewhere in this area, ideally. If it does, great, you don't have to do anything. If not, we pop this rubber guy off and twist the little plastic screw one way or the other so that it triggers where you want. You'll have to just trial and error the thing, but if it helps, in this particular case, clockwise is closer to the middle. The manual suggests 62 millimeters from the center shaft. And what do you know? It works. Let's check one other maintenance thing though before we look at that dust cover. The cartridge can sometimes get misaligned in the head shell as well. That can make it sound distorted and overemphasize one side or the other. To adjust that, you can use a simple alignment protractor. They're super cheap on Amazon. I got this one because it's also a speed checker. You just center the stylus on the circle and check that the front of the cartridge is in line with the grid, which this one is on both. If it weren't, you'd loosen the top bolts and adjust it until it was correct. So let's look at that dust cover. This thing was not very shiny. Fortunately, this is a mini polisher from Amazon. It's small because I wanted something that wasn't too bulky since all I'm doing is small dust covers, but corded because polishing tends to eat through batteries. And these are Novus plastic polishes. I saw Adam Savage have some success with them on a tape recorder, so I'm trying them out. The dust cover just slips off the turntable. I removed the hinges and put some electrical tape on the little Pioneer badge so that I don't mess up the finish on it. Then I got to work polishing it. I went to film the process, but it immediately shot polish all over the camera, so that didn't work out. It was a really messy process, so I'm really glad that I did it outside. This is how it turned out. It's at least better than it was, but it could be shinier than this. I probably will go back in and work it over a little bit more. I just hooked the hinges back on, removed the piece of tape, and reinstalled it on the turntable. Now that everything's cleaned up and calibrated, let's take a quick tour of it, yeah? This is the Pioneer automatic return model PL-514 from 1978. As the name implies, it has automatic return, which means when the record you're listening to gets to the end, it doesn't just keep playing the run out groove forever, and instead will bring the tone arm back to its rest position and turn the machine off, which is a very convenient feature if you have a tendency to fall asleep listening to music. Operation is exactly the same as any consumer grade turntable. Set your record on the platter, set your speed, unclip the tone arm and raise the arm elevation lever, bring the tone arm over the record and drop it in place. It'll begin playing and you're good to go. When it's done, it does its auto return dance and that's it. This, like most decent record players of its era, runs with either a moving magnet or moving coil style cartridge, so you'll need either an amplifier with a built-in phono preamp or a separate external phono preamp because the output level of these machines is much quieter than the line level output of tape players, CD players, and radios. This Pioneer SA500A from my previous video has a built-in phono preamp, so something like this will work great. To hook it up is very easy. You just attach the RCA cords to the phono input on your amp and the little spade connector to the ground screw. That's the ground. Without a ground connection, you can get some pretty nasty buzzing, so don't skip that. If you need to oil the motor, the user manual shows you where to do it. Just lift the rubber slip mat off and rotate the platter to expose the motor. You can see the two holes. Just apply a couple of drops of oil to each of them. I like to use gun oil in a little needle applicator bottle because it doesn't make a mess, the oil doesn't gum up easily, and it prevents oxidation, so it's really nice for old electronics like this. Let's take a quick look at the internals. This is one of my favorite features of this turntable. You ready? You don't have to flip it over to open it up. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I can't tell you how much easier it is to not have to flip this thing over. You just lift the slip mat off, pop the belt off the motor spindle, and remove the metal platter. Underneath are these 5 screws. Just unscrew them and the black metal cover will lift off. You can see all the parts and gears for the automatic return mechanism and the little shutoff switch. Everything is made of plastic, which isn't as nice as metal, but it's not flimsy, and at least this one doesn't show signs of becoming brittle. So as far as I'm concerned, it's fine. It works, and that's what matters. The speed selector is just a little guide that's linked to the selector switch that pushes the belt to either the thick or narrow part of the motor spindle to adjust the speed. The motor itself doesn't actually change speed. When you're putting everything back together, remember you have to get the belt threaded back onto the spindle. That's really easy if you have the right tool. I like these little picks. You can just grab the belt and slip it back onto the spindle quickly. A couple of other thoughts. I like the way the tone arm attaches to the body with this circular piece of aluminum. It's got a nice style. I also got a kick out of something in the service manual. Now, I know I'm a Californian, so I talk like a Californian. Solder, Techniques brand, whatever. But I thought this was amusing. They refer to the toothed lock washers as internal and outternal instead of external. I've never heard it called that before, but I like it. So that's all for now. I hope you guys got something out of that. I've never tried polishing a dust cover before. That was a fun experiment. So for today, I'd like to pose a question. Have you guys ever found any cool, useful tricks for cleaning your equipment or some really useful products? Let me know in the comments. That's one of those things that I think we all have to deal with, so any help is welcome. And with that, I'll see you guys soon. Keep thrifting and stay metal.